You wake up, check your phone, scroll for a bit, get out of bed. The day begins. You move through it, maybe even achieve something, maybe laugh once or twice. But underneath it all, there's a dullness, a quiet, persistent flatline. It's not quite sadness, not quite depression, just this eerie lack of feeling, like life is happening on the other side of a glass wall. You can see it, but you can't feel it. And the strangest part? You're not alone. More and more people are describing the same thing, a numbness they can't explain, a fading sense of meaning, an inability to feel excited, even about things they once loved. They blame stress, the economy, burnout, social media. But Carl Jung would have looked deeper. He believed that when nothing excites us anymore, it's not a sign that life has lost its magic. It's a sign that we've lost our connection to the soul. In Jung's view, the soul doesn't speak through logic. It speaks through symbols, dreams, feelings, and instincts. It lives in the depths. But most of us never go there. We've become disconnected, distracted, overstimulated, obsessed with productivity, but starved of meaning. And when the soul is ignored, it retreats. It goes silent. And with it, so does our sense of aliveness. This isn't a motivational talk. This is a mirror, a look into why everything feels flat, even when nothing is technically wrong. Today, we won't tell you to try harder. We'll tell you to go inward, because the emptiness you feel isn't the absence of joy. It's the absence of depth. And that depth can't be found on the surface of your life. It's waiting underneath, buried beneath the noise. Let's go find it. It creeps in quietly. At first, it's just a lack of enthusiasm. You cancel plans, not because you're sad, but because you don't feel anything. Music doesn't move you. Achievements feel hollow. Even rest feels more like a reset button than actual peace. You keep functioning, going to work, replying to messages, even smiling when it's expected. But behind the performance, there's nothing. Just a strange absence. Not of life, but of feeling. Most people don't talk about this kind of emptiness because it doesn't sound dramatic enough to be a crisis. You're not falling apart. You're just disconnected. Like you're watching your life instead of living it. You keep waiting for something to pull you back in, to make you feel like yourself again. But nothing does. And the more time passes, the more you begin to wonder if this numbness is just who you are now. Carl Jung would have called this a symptom of spiritual starvation. Not religious in the traditional sense, but spiritual in the psychological one, the erosion of meaning. He believed that when we lose connection with our deeper self, with the unconscious, with what he called the soul, we lose access to vitality. Life becomes a loop, predictable, mechanical, empty. The numbness isn't laziness or weakness. It's a signal, a quiet cry from the neglected parts of yourself, the ones you've silenced in the name of being productive, likable, successful, the parts that dream, that wonder, that feel deeply. And when those parts are exiled, you don't feel less pain. You feel less everything. That's the real danger. Not burnout of the body, but burnout of the soul. And unless you answer that signal, life will keep moving, but you won't be in it. Just beside it, watching, waiting, detached. Every second, your senses are being hijacked. A flash of color, a vibrating notification, a new headline, a joke, a tragedy, a product. Before your nervous system can process one thing, the next is already demanding your attention. It never stops. And somewhere along the way, your brain stopped trying to keep up. Not because it's weak, but because it's overwhelmed. So it shuts down. Numbness becomes a form of self-protection. We call it boredom. We call it burnout. But Carl Jung would have called it something else: psychic fragmentation. The soul's slow disintegration under the weight of too much noise, too many images, too little stillness. You weren't designed to process thousands of lives a day. You weren't made to watch a war, a wedding, a joke, and a tragedy back to back in under 5 minutes. You weren't built for this much everything, this fast. And the cost is your depth. The very part of you that feels wonder, awe, and meaning begins to dull. Because when every moment is filled, none of it feels sacred. And when you're constantly distracted, you never actually descend into yourself. You live on the surface, chasing stimulation, mistaking it for joy. Jung believed that meaning doesn't come from the outside in. It arises from a dialogue between your conscious mind and the unconscious depths of your soul. But that conversation can't happen when your attention is scattered across 1,000 digital shards. There's no space, no silence. And so the soul, finding no invitation, retreats. The result isn't immediate collapse. It's slow erosion. Life starts to feel thin. Moments blur together, and even pleasure becomes dull. Not because you're broken, but because you're overstimulated and underconnected. Not to the world, but to yourself. And meaning doesn't scream. It whispers. Only silence can hear it. There was a time when silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. When solitude wasn't something to fear, but something to seek. Not because life was simpler then, but because people hadn't yet forgotten how to listen inward. Carl Jung believed that our inner world, our dreams, symbols, instincts, and unconscious desires, was not just background noise. It was the very source of meaning. And when that dialogue stops, we don't just lose direction, we lose feeling. The modern world teaches us to look outward for answers, for validation, for excitement. We scroll, we search, we consume, hoping that something out there will spark what's dying inside. But the soul doesn't respond to content. It responds to connection. And connection can't be streamed or scheduled. It requires space. It requires attention. It requires the quiet courage to turn toward what most people spend their lives avoiding: themselves. The inner world isn't always comfortable. It holds buried emotions, forgotten longings, childhood wounds, old fears. But it also holds gold: intuition, creativity, vision, vitality. When you stop tending to that inner terrain, you don't just miss out on peace. You lose the ability to be moved by life itself. Jung didn't believe healing came from escape. He believed it came from integration. And integration only happens when we restore the conversation with the unconscious. When we pay attention to our dreams. When we ask why we feel empty instead of numbing it. When we stop performing long enough to actually hear what the silence has been trying to say. The soul isn't missing. It's waiting. Not in the next experience, but in the ones you've already had and never processed. You don't need more stimulation. You need restoration. And that begins the moment you stop running from your inner voice and start listening. Not everything you've buried stays quiet. The feelings you've labeled as too much, too dark, or too inconvenient don't disappear. They sink. And in the shadows of your psyche, they begin to ferment. Carl Jung warned that what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves becomes the very force that controls us, not through chaos, but through emptiness. When you suppress your shadow, you don't just lock away anger, fear, envy, or desire. You lock away energy because all of those feelings, uncomfortable as they are, carry life force. They are raw, unfiltered parts of your humanity. And when you exile them, the soul doesn't grow more pure. It grows more pale. You become flat, not because you've healed, but because you've muted yourself in the name of staying acceptable, safe, or spiritually good. The culture rewards that silence. It celebrates emotional control, spiritual bypassing, and the illusion of constant positivity. But Jung knew that wholeness does not come from perfection. It comes from integration. And without facing the parts of yourself you've denied, no amount of meditation, manifestation, or morning routines will save you from the numbness that follows. You can't feel fully alive when you're only living with half of yourself. And when those rejected parts of your psyche are pushed too far into the dark, they stop screaming and start whispering. In exhaustion, in apathy, in the quiet fading of excitement. Your vitality doesn't die in a moment. It drains slowly as more and more of who you are gets edited out. The shadow doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be seen, not indulged, not worshipped, but understood. And when it is, something miraculous happens. The energy returns, not because you became better, but because you finally became whole enough to hold all of yourself, even the parts you once feared. You set a goal, chase it, hit it. For a moment, there's a flicker of pride, maybe even a surge of satisfaction. But then it's gone, and you're already looking for the next thing, another checkbox, another metric, another reason to feel like your life means something. Carl Jung warned that when we mistake goals for purpose, we begin to lose our soul, and we don't even notice it happening. We live in a culture that confuses direction with depth. You're told to hustle, to achieve, to optimize every hour. You build the perfect life on paper, but it feels like a stranger's life when you live it. Because somewhere along the way, your goals stopped coming from within. They started coming from expectation, pressure, comparison. And the more you achieve, the emptier it all feels. Not because you failed, but because you never asked if any of it mattered to you in the first place. Jung believed that purpose isn't a task, it's a resonance. It comes from alignment, not activity. You can be busy every hour of the day and still feel completely hollow. Because if your actions aren't connected to your inner life, they won't generate excitement. They'll drain it. And slowly, you'll start to think something's wrong with you. But it's not you. It's the path you were sold. Real purpose can't be measured in outcomes. It can only be felt in truth. It's quiet, subtle, personal. And that's why most people miss it. They're too busy climbing ladders that lead nowhere, ticking boxes that never end. The tragedy isn't failure. It's success without fulfillment. And until you stop chasing goals that were never yours, nothing, no matter how shiny, will ever feel exciting. Because the soul doesn't care what you achieve. It cares whether you're alive while doing it. Most people live like echoes. Echoes of their upbringing. Echoes of their culture. Echoes of what they think they're supposed to be. Carl Jung called this the prelude to sleepwalking, a state where you function but don't feel, achieve but don't connect, exist but never truly live. And the antidote? He called it individuation. Individuation isn't self-improvement. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about finding yourself. It's the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are, not the image you constructed, not the expectations you absorbed, but the full, living reality of your inner being. That process doesn't begin with motivation. It begins with a kind of quiet inner unrest, the feeling that life on the surface just isn't enough anymore. You can't fake individuation. It demands honesty. It asks you to peel away what you've outgrown, to confront the stories you've inherited, and to integrate the parts of you you've exiled. It's messy, lonely at times, because it requires stepping out of the collective narrative and choosing to write your own. But in that step, something sacred is restored: aliveness. Excitement doesn't come from chasing novelty. It comes from resonance. When your inner world and outer choices align, you don't have to force energy. It flows. And when you start living from a place of inner truth, even the quietest moments begin to hum with meaning. Jung believed that individuation was the deepest responsibility of a human life, not for glory, not for success, but because until you become whole, everything you touch will feel partial, including joy, including purpose, including love. The call to individuate is the call to wake up. And when you answer it, you don't just return to yourself, you return to life, fully, freely, fiercely, as someone real. There's a difference between being alive and feeling alive. One is biological, the other is spiritual. And if you're honest, you've probably felt the gap. You breathe, you move, you get things done. But the fire? The part of you that once felt lit up by small things, by unexpected wonder, by a deep sense of yes? It's gone quiet, not extinguished, just forgotten. Carl Jung believed that aliveness doesn't come from the outside. It emerges when the inner world is no longer neglected. Excitement isn't a byproduct of entertainment. It's a symptom of alignment. When your actions, your thoughts, your dreams, and your desires begin to echo the same truth, something stirs, something ancient. The soul steps forward, and with it comes the feeling you've been chasing all along. Not a thrill, but a resonance. But to feel that again, you have to stop outsourcing your vitality. No app, no lifestyle trend, no success story will hand it to you. Because what you're missing isn't stimulation, it's connection. The kind that happens when you stop avoiding your feelings, when you stop pretending your inner life doesn't matter, when you slow down long enough to hear the quiet rhythm beneath the noise. This isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about feeling real, about waking up to the raw, unfiltered truth of your own existence, and letting that truth guide you, no matter how strange or inconvenient it looks to the world. Aliveness returns not when everything is perfect, but when everything inside you is finally welcome. You don't need more to feel alive. You need less of what numbs you, and more of what is yours. Your path, your rhythm, your truth. That's where the flame is, waiting. Not to be found, but to be remembered.